Hello, and welcome to Conversational Leadership with Jay Mann. I'm your host, Jay Mann, and today I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Lorisa Pombo, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning here in the Creighton School District. And Dr. Pombo and I are going to kind of continue on from the conversation that we had about our student outcomes-focused governance goals and moving into the new year. In that conversation, we referenced our theory of action and how it impacts things like the interim measures that we're utilizing. And so today, Dr. Pombo is going to be kind enough to give us a little bit more information about that and allow us to delve more deeply into theory of action and how it impacts those areas. So welcome, Dr. Pombo.
Superintendent Mann, thank you for having me here today. Last night, our governing board approved our interim measures for our goals and guardrails. And I know when we talked last time, we didn't get into the theory of action of how those were developed. And so we wanted to share a little bit about that today.
Yeah.
With the goals and guardrails, we have interim measures, and those are just things that we measure throughout the year to see if we're on track for our annual targets. So when you think about, I think you give the analogy of traveling, like if I'm trying to get from Phoenix to Miami's our goal, but then the interim measures are kind of just tracking our mileage along the way to see if we're on target or on track to get to Miami by the end of the year.
Yeah.
So our first goal, which we talked about before, is our math goal. We want to decrease minimally proficient students.
Right.
And our goal is by 2028, which is 2 years from now. I have it in front of me so I can reference it, is to get to 48%. And we started out at 73%.
Right.
So this past year, we ended at 68%.
Right.
So our goal is to go from 68 to 58%. So that'll be kind of like our Miami marker this year. And so, and some of our interim measures that we have is we're going to continue to use the DNA assessment for 2 of those interim measures. And then, as you know, I think many of you have experienced or been giving the STAR assessment. We have that as a new interim measure to measure growth, to see where our students are academically. As we know, the DNA measures the state standards for that grade level, but the STAR assessment is going to measure where they are at, if they're, 4th grade level, or if they're at 6th grade level. It just gives you easier questions if you get them wrong, so we can determine what standards you know, and they give you harder questions if you get them right to see which standards you know as well. So it's very positive to see what standards you know, so the teachers can use that data to guide their instruction.
Yeah, it's more asset-based and a little more diagnostic and really helps support the teacher doing that differentiation in the classroom. And it's interesting because you started off with that travel analogy, right?
Yeah.
And then you said, hey, we're trying to get to this point, but we've only made about 5% progress towards that. But the reality is we were off course originally, right?
Yes.
I think in our first 2 years, we went the wrong direction, which really kind of fits with that travel analogy. If we weren't measuring, if we weren't tracking what was happening, we wouldn't even know that we were off course. So we've made adjustments to our travel route along the way, and that adjustment to our travel route, while we're 5% better than where we started, it was an 11% shift from where we ended the prior year. So now we're back on track. We know we can affect those improvements. And while we only have 2 years to make the rest of that fairly long distance, we know a lot more about the pitfalls and where you can take wrong exits along the freeway, right? So hopefully we're on a much better track in order to be successful in reaching that 2028 goal.
Yeah, we have our inputs in place that we know are effective, which comes from our theory of action, which I'll get to in a minute. So goals 2 and 4, actually, we have the same interim measures. We're using DNA for 2 of them, and then we're using the STAR assessment. Goal 2 is looking at our improving our proficiency for our Black students. And then goal 3 is improving literacy for 3rd graders, but obviously that's really like K3.
Right.
So we still have the 2 DNA measures and 1 STAR measurement.
Right.
Do you want to share that one of our goals was put on the trophy case?
Yeah. So at last night's board meeting, we originally started out with 4 goals, and the original goal 3 was around moving students into higher levels of ability with their acquisition of English language. If they were our emerging multilingual students, the students that the state has indicated, need this additional support with language acquisition of the English language. And for that one, that's been our goal, that like each year we've exceeded our annual target. Like we clearly not only set out on a journey, but we chose the right freeway system and the right places to stop, for restroom breaks, snacks, and to fuel up. And so in year one, we actually achieved the first 2 years of annual targets for that goal. In year two, we went, I think, to the fourth year's annual target for that particular goal. And last year, we exceeded the final 2028 annual goal by, I think, more than 10%, right? So we had a big debate about whether we put it in the trophy case, or fundamentally shift how we keep an eye on it, because it's not like we're not going to keep an eye on this anymore, but we just want to reduce the amount of additional monitoring we're doing and shift that additional monitoring as a resource into what was goal 4 before will now be the new goal 3. We'll talk about that in a moment. And so the board was supportive of that, because we not only had a year where we exceeded the annual target, we have a 3-year pattern of continually growing, developing, and improving in that arena. And we know that the inputs and the systems that we put in place are being effective, and we're not taking those away at this point. In fact, we're moving forward with continuing to enhance them and expand them, knowing that will just broaden the reach of the impact.
And then Superintendent Mann, you keep mentioning inputs.
Yeah, yes.
And inputs are going to be that come from our theory of action. I don't know if this looks familiar to everybody, but I'm going to go through this when we go through our guardrails. But to close up the goals are all our student outputs. Yeah. There are how our student. They're basically the DNA assessment and our STAR assessment tells us what our students know and can do. So it's all from the student perspective and looking at student learning data.
Right.
When we go to the guardrails are going to be more of our adult inputs, so what we're doing as a system to protect the guardrails, but then also some of these guardrails do align to the goals to help us achieve those goals. So I want to share for both the goals and the guardrails, we have a theory of action. It looks like this, and in the very middle it has leaders are change agents, and all of us are leaders, not just from the district level and principals, but we have teacher leaders, student leaders, we have leaders in our community. So all the leaders are change agent, and these blue circles represent really high leverage strategies that we know will get us to our goals. And so to give an example of one, which would be high quality teaching. So we know if we have high quality teaching, we're going to have great instruction in the classroom and our kids are going to learn. And it's just kind of like a big idea of, we know if we have high quality teaching that we're going to meet our goals. So the inputs is how do we make sure we have high quality teaching? What strategies are we going to do to have that? Another one on here is the data-wise and school improvement process. So we do need to have a process for looking at data and adjusting our instruction to look at the STAR data, DNA data. And so we know if we're looking at data on a consistent basis, then we know that we're going to address what our students' needs are and then make sure we adjust our instruction. So we have inputs to make sure we're doing data-wise. So all of these are just big strategies that we know will get us to our goals. And so in the guardrails, some of these strategies are represented in the guardrails with our inputs.
Yep. Yeah, so to go back to our travel analogy, we've talked about this before, but those guardrails are like the literal guardrails on the freeway. When you're driving up a mountain, you don't want to go rolling off the cliffside, so there's that barrier that's there, right? And so while the goals are really, the vision that the community has for our students, the guardrails are the community's values, the things that we cannot violate in order to be successful in our goals. So we can make changes, do what we need to do to create success with our goals, as long as we're not crossing those guardrails. And so it kind of fits with that travel analogy as well.
Well, I'm going to share the first guardrail. The first guardrail is the superintendent will not neglect student social, emotional health, wellness, and development. This is really important to our community and our goal that we really focus on our child's social, emotional health, wellness, and development. So from the big circle, we took the one that says stakeholder involvement, because we know, hearing from our families and our students and our teachers and our staff, what's really important to make sure that we are continuing to develop the student social, emotional. So we have stakeholder involvement, and then the input that we have is ruler. And I know you've talked about ruler on a previous podcast.
Yeah, we had Dr. Burgess on, and she did an amazing job walking everybody through the ruler method with us.
So we want to measure the implementation of ruler. As you know, last year, our leadership council team got training on Ruler. And this year, we want our leadership teams to train our teachers and staff so they can implement in that classroom. So that's what we're monitoring this year with our input of, is Ruler being successfully implemented this year? So we have 2 inputs measuring that implementation. The first one is that there's 9 modules, so that you'll get 9 modules throughout the year. And so our interim measure is that all of our schools will be delivering at least 8 of the 9 modules so that our staff gets the training for Ruler. The reason why we have 8 is we know sometimes there might be a PD that something they have to do something else or something else. So we just wanted to give a little leeway in case you couldn't get all 9 in. But there are 9 modules, and we know that our schools are already started that training in July. The second interim measure, actually it's the third, but I'm just talking about the Ruler right now. So the third one is measuring, okay, now you got the training, are you implementing this in the classroom? And so the third interim measure is measuring, are we implementing the 4 parts of Ruler in the classroom, which are the charter, the mood meter, the meta moment, and the blueprint. So we do learning walks every quarter. We do about 200 learning walks. We try to get into every single teacher's classroom, the DataWise team, and that's one of our ways of gathering data. And that's that street data to see what's happening in the classroom. And so the first half of the year, we know that our teachers will start to implement Ruler, but we're actually not going to measure it in our learning walks until January. So we'll start measuring, is Ruler being implemented January through May? And that's going to be our interim measure, and it's going to be measured through our learning walks.
Great.
And then the last interim measure, because we know this from our Kids Congress kids, is that they said that they will come to school if they have a positive culture and climate, if they can share their feelings, if they have that social emotional support from their peers and from their teachers and from the staff at the school. And so one of the areas we've been working on is attendance. And we know attendance, if you're at school, that means that hopefully it's a good environment and you're happy to be there to learn. And so we're going to be measuring the effectiveness of Ruler by looking at attendance. Now, last year we looked at improving attendance each year. This year we're looking at, when we have students absent more than 3 days, are they getting contacted by the school to say, hey, we miss you, we want you back at school? We know that once it gets to 3, it could start turning into a pattern of missing school. So it's kind of like being proactive to check in with the student to see why they're not at school so we can make those changes and help the student be successful.
So it follows that stakeholder concept, right? Like one of our big circles from our theory of action. And it does so by really paying attention to those stakeholders that we really value their voice, which is our students themselves. And we get a lot of that through Kids Congress, as you mentioned. And so they mention this to us, and we're adding another layer where we're monitoring, are we giving them that extra layer of support? So I love and appreciate that.
Yeah. And then our second guardrail, the superintendent will not cause or allow conditions, practices, or procedures that are inequitable or insufficient for students. And this one, we just want to make sure that every student is getting what they need to help them be successful. And so the theory of action, the big blue circle that we're addressing, this was instructional leadership. And part of that instructional leadership is the input of multi-tiered systems of support. And I know I explained that on the last podcast about the analogy of health, like everyone needs tier 1, where you have a healthy diet and sleep and workout. And then there's tier 2 and tier 3 where students might need some additional support. So we're going to be measuring our multi-tiered systems of support to make sure every student gets what they need and have the conditions to be successful.
Great.
So the first interim measure for this guardrail is measuring our tier 1. So to make, and we have this, actually I forgot to say, we have this all focused on literacy.
Right.
So we're looking at the multi-tier system of support could be for math, it could be for literacy, it could be for behavior, but we're looking at just literacy for this guardrail. And the first one is to make sure that in our 2nd and 3rd grade classrooms, that every student is getting that tier 1 instruction to help them improve their literacy, because we know that if you're at grade level by 3rd grade, you're more likely to be successful in school the rest of their school year. So we want to make sure everyone gets that solid tier 1 instruction, which has to do with the analogy, like everyone gets a really good night's sleep, everyone gets a good diet, everyone gets some time outside. Everyone's going to get good instruction on reading, writing, listening, and speaking, so that's that first foundation.
Right.
And that's going to be measured through learning walks too, going into classrooms and watching teaching during that time. The second one is for Tier 2, and Tier 2 is where our K-3 teachers will be using our district-adopted material, 95% group. We want to make sure that every student has high-quality instructional materials. This is something we adopted in the last couple of years for students to have this, and it's also approved by our Arizona Department of Education for improving literacy. And so last year we had 67% of our students receiving instruction using 95% group, and our goal this year is 80%. And that's going to be measured through our coaching conversations and coaching in the classroom.
Great.
And the last one is Tier 3, and this one we're measuring our ESS students, our exceptionally student services support. But Tier 3 could also doesn't have to be special education. It could be any student that needs additional support besides Tier 2.
Right.
And Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 are all different ways to meet the needs of the child. They're not the same at each tier. So on Tier 3, the students that need some more support in reading, which would be with the SRA, that's the curriculum that we're using for that they will have an average of 120 lessons per year. Last year we had 89 lessons, so we want to improve that to 120 lessons. We know that 130 lessons is the ultimate target, but right now we're just going from 89 to 120 lessons for our Tier 3. So this guardrail, again, is making sure that every student has access to rigorous instruction, but also high-quality curriculum materials.
That's great.
And then guardrail 3 is really about taking care of our teachers and staff. So I'll read that one. The superintendent will not allow the district to operate without a system to recruit, retain strong teachers by empowering staff through culturally relevant and differentiated professional development. And this one, our big circle is the blue circle, the data-wise school improvement process. And our input is professional learning communities. And I know you shared the research, how important it is for professional learning communities and how that helps our teachers. Do you want to share?
Yeah. So I think, obviously, as an instructional tool set, it's really powerful for making sure we're supporting our students effectively and we're supporting our students as a team. But the other piece is there's a lot of research around why teachers stay in the profession, what makes them successful and happy in the profession. And, obviously we hear a lot about teacher pay, and that's an important component. But in addition to that, one of the really big things is that sense of support and community with other teachers, the environment, that they're working in. Like, and when I say environment, I don't necessarily mean, certainly they want a nice space to work in, but it's really more about what's the culture of the school. Are they supported by their principal and other leaders on the campus, but supporting each other? And I've probably talked a whole bunch of times on this podcast about the Gallup research around engagement, and also the research that's out there around how having a friend at work makes you more engaged and more effective in your role. Having a PLC is changing the environment of a teacher from being alone by yourself in a 900 square foot box with the kids that you're supporting to having a team that you're working with, where you're supporting each other, you're helping each other look at the data and understand what's happening, you're trading off roles and responsibilities. So it creates a community out of what's typically a lone activity. And so when we talk about recruitment and retention, it's a perfect fit. In this one, they also reference professional development, which our board has talked about. Like, not everything has to be professional development, but PLC fits that as well, because we've done and will continue to do a lot of professional development about being an effective PLC. So this one, I think, will really help our teachers feel successful, be successful, feel fulfilled, and enjoy their work as a teacher in our district.
And what's really important about professional learning communities is that everyone's working towards the same goal. And there's a lot of research, if you're a part of a group where you have the same vision and goal that you're working towards together, that you feel happy and motivated and satisfied. And it's also an asset-based approach, because I might be an expert in something and you might be an expert in something else, and we're learning from each other's strengths to make our own classroom stronger. And so that's a really exciting thing about professional learning communities, is seeing the collaboration among teachers and among schools. So this guardrail is measuring measuring PLCs with all three interim measures. So the first one is that originally we had 4 PLCs a year, which was our DataWise days that were designated district PLC days. So this year our goal is to go from 4 per year to 16 per year per grade level. And that just means that they're meeting more periodically and also have an opportunity to talk to data, looking at our common formative assessments throughout the year. And because our DataWise ones, we're looking mostly at benchmark assessments. So looking at those in-between measures. When we talk back about our trip from Phoenix to Miami, we have the big measures like, did we make it to, I don't know what would be a big city to make it to
Well,
first.
from here, we might hit El Paso at some point.
Okay, El Paso. But in between El Paso, we have little checkpoints to make sure
Maybe
that we're
Tucson.
getting there. Yes. And so that's what the PLC is checking is those formative assessments along the way. And so that's the first one. The second two are very similar. One is that our K-3 PLC teams are looking at the data to make decisions about literacy instruction. And then the third one is our 6th through 8th grade math teachers are looking at math data to make decisions about math instruction in the classroom. So all 3 measures are measuring PLCs, but just in the different parts of the PLC.
Great.
And then the last guardrail, the superintendent shall not allow adult convenience or preference to take priority over the academic progress of students. And this one really goes back to the whole foundation of student outcome focused governance is that you could say the quote better than me.
Yeah. So student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors
Yes.
change. And the important part, starting with me.
Yes. And so this one really is about adult behavior changing and helping each other hold each other accountable to those changes. And so the big circle theory of action for this one that I talked about at the very beginning is high quality teaching. And then in order for us to get high quality teaching, the input is having student engagement rigor in the classroom. And so we're measuring that in 3 different ways. The first one is looking at success criteria. So last year we went to 800 classrooms, around 800 classrooms. And when we looked at our average over the year, and we looked at mostly by March 2027, because we know the learning walks after that are around testing time. So that our average for rigor was 44%. And every year we've gone up 10%. Like we started at 34, last year we went to 44. So this year our goal is to go to, oh, I'm sorry, I looked at it wrong. 51 to 60%, that's success criteria. When we look at engagement and rigor on the rubric, last year we were at 44, and this year we want to go to 54. So for success criteria, we're going up 10%. For student engagement, it's 10%. And when we do those data-wise learning walks, we know it's just a snapshot, but we should be able to see the indicators for those when we're in there for those 10, 15 minutes that we should be able to find evidence for both of those. And when we say engagement and rigor, we're looking at the students doing most of the work most of the time, and the students are the ones that are reading, writing, listening, speaking. And they should be doing that in every lesson, regardless of what content you teach. Students should be talking to each other, listening, reading and speaking, reading and writing. And then also that it's at a DOK level 2 or higher, that it's not just memorization, that they're having a discussion about their thoughts and explaining their thinking, that they're not just memorizing answers.
And DOK stands for depth of knowledge, right? So when you say they're explaining their thoughts and all those things, that's a higher level of engagement and thinking than maybe just answering a question, did you see this, yes or no, right?
And then the third one is actually a new one, but everyone was wanted to really do this together, is that we know our principals are in classrooms, but we haven't been really measuring the amount of times they've been in classrooms and giving feedback. And so this one is that we have a goal of an average of 75 learning walks per quarter for each admin team. So principals, assistant principals will be in classroom 75 times per quarter, and they will be filling out the classroom mosaic learning walk tool. And every school is different, so they might just be looking for learning targets that day, so you might just get feedback on learning targets, or you might just get feedback on your classroom management, but you will be getting something from your principals when they visit your classroom through classroom mosaic. And so those are 3 ways that we are measuring our adult behaviors to help improve teaching.
Wonderful.
So that was a lot. That was all of our goals and guardrails.
That is a lot, but it does feel much more aligned this year. And I think that's because of the hard work that the team put into making sure that we were working from our theory of action as we were putting together those interim measures. So really appreciate that hard work and your amazing explanation of it. Hopefully people understand what a theory of action is a little bit more, how it applies to our interim measures and the way that we're working with our goals and guardrails. Anything you want to close us out with that you think is important people should know?
The only thing I wanted to add is that there's a lot of things on here about instruction and leadership, but another big part of the theory of action is operational excellence and also people excellence. So our human resources department. So those are not really reflected in our goals or guardrails, but our operational excellence and our human resources excellence they do have their own inputs that they're doing to support student outcome focused governance. So when you see the circles, you'll see some that I did not talk about, but those are still being addressed. They're just not directly in the guardrails or goals.
Yeah, I mean, we can only measure so many things in a given year, right? And different years, sometimes we measure different things. And just because something's not specifically an interim measure for this year doesn't mean that the efforts in that arena aren't happening. And one of the things I'm really proud about us as a district is our alignment as a district doesn't just extend into the classrooms and at the school level and at the district academic level, but like you said, it's in all of our operational areas: business and finance, technology, nutrition and wellness, communication, all of these different things that we do. But then it also is in our human resources space as well. And so in prior years, we measured things about other areas of recruitment and retention. We're just leaning into that PLC component this year because we know from our conversations with stakeholders, with our teachers, with our students, our Kids Congress students, that level of support and that type of camaraderie and being able to work together is something that's valued and has big impact. And it does, in addition to the other impacts it has big impact on teacher retention and their fulfillment in their own career. So, those things are definitely out there, but we can only measure so much in a given year.
Well, I know that when we were here last, we just didn't have an opportunity to go through the theory of action, and it was fun to come back to be able to share what our board approved last night. And then obviously we have all of our principals, assistant principals, coaches, and departments available for any questions and support for these.
Yeah, which is important as well. So, I really appreciate you coming on. Always one of my favorite people to work with and favorite people to have as a guest. And I know in one of our other podcasts, I think I queued you up for a future guest appearance to talk with our audience about the 5 dysfunctions of team, which is other work we're doing with our leadership team. So excited to have you back for that conversation in the future. And thanks again for being here today.
Thank you.